All right, continuing on with the TMCC Library Open Genealogy Lab Outstanding Guest Speaker Series, today we are pleased to present Christina Gibson. Preserving your family recipes and creating your family history cookbook is an important part of any genealogist's toolkit. It's an invaluable way to pass on the traditions of your family from one generation to the next. It's also a great way to inform future generations about the stories behind the recipes as you and your ancestors actually lived through them. So today I would like to introduce our guest speaker. Christina is a wife, mother, and creative. She was raised in Mobile, Alabama, and grew up in a house centered on community. She graduated from the, hopefully I'm pronouncing this right, Oglethorpe University in Atlanta with a Bachelor of Arts degree in Liberal Studies, Communications and Rhetoric Studies, and a minor in business. She now resides in the outskirts of Atlanta with her family and has been working for CreateMyCookbook since 2018. As the Director of Growth for CreateMyCookbook, Christina's mission is to make recipe preservation easier and more attainable for all families everywhere. So I'd like to offer a warm virtual welcome to Christina.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Susan, and thanks everyone for having me. It was really enjoyable to get to chat with everyone and hear about all your family stories. And, kind of to chat about something that I do feel very, very passionate about, which is family recipes and how we can use them to tell our family stories. I'll briefly talk about the moment that I think I realized exactly how important this is. So I've worked with Cookbook again for about 5 years. And when I started, of course, I felt like I had such a strong connection. I love family, I love food. Recipe preservation was a natural mission to be a part of. But it wasn't until COVID and having my daughter that I realized exactly how important this is. So I was in my 3rd trimester. We all went into lockdown and I had my daughter. I was very sad that I didn't get to introduce her to family and friends and our traditions. And especially hit me when we had Mardi Gras of 2021. And that's because for us, we're now in Atlanta and we always go back to Mobile. And when we're in Mobile, we celebrate Mardi Gras, we celebrate our family, and we eat the delicious Cajun food that's a part of it and eat king cake. And we weren't getting to do that. And I just felt devastated. So my husband came up with the idea of us having our own Mardi Gras celebration at home. So my best friend mailed up a king cake. And if you've never had king cake, you should really look into that. There's a very fun tradition behind it about hiding the baby. So I do have a joke that I found the baby that year. But he then began to prepare a family recipe of jambalaya. And when you prepare jambalaya, you start with what we call the Trinity, which is bell pepper and onion and celery. And I can specifically remember that moment because as that smell kind of filled our condo, I became very overwhelmed with an emotion. It brought me back to my childhood, and I was getting to share that with our daughter. And so she was 9 months. We were starting solids, and I remember feeding her this rich rice dish and feeling so connected, not only to her, but feeling so connected to my family, previous generations, and to my husband's family, and to just Mobile, our home. And so from that moment, I think I do now 100% understand our mission completely. And so it's a great mission to be a part of. You will see here this past year, we did get to take her to Mardi Gras for the first year. It was an outside parade. She had a blast as expected. So a little bit about CreateMyCookbook, some fun facts. It's our mission to help families preserve and celebrate those family recipes and their stories. Thus far, we have helped preserve about 5.7 million recipes. And a few additional fun facts. So if we take all of those recipes and we look at what are the author names that are most common, and those would be grandma, nana, mom, dad. And I love that. I love that that just shows how these recipes, they are truly family recipes. And additional other fun facts that we had that I'd love to share with you guys is I love it when we look at how many recipes do we have with a certain ingredient. So we'll start with my favorite ingredient, chocolate. Of this 5.47 million, about over 400,000 of them contain chocolate. So I'm very proud of that. A few other fun ones are Jell-O. We have over 49,000 recipes that contain Jell-O, and only just over 5,000 contain grits. I think we need to up that. So if anyone has grit recipes, they need to put those in. One that's always controversial because you either love it or you hate it is cilantro. and we have over 100,000 recipes that contain cilantro. Last little fun fact is liver. So recipes that contain liver, we have over 39,000 recipes that contain liver. So I think that's always a fun thing. So, as part of being at Create My Cookbook, we do get to hear customer stories every day, and there are some absolutely phenomenal stories, and they can share. They can explain generations and generations of family in these cookbooks, and I love that. And in particular, we have this one, Terry. Terry has created a cookbook that is full of recipes from her uncle who owned a restaurant in a local in Texas. And so we have a video of Terry. It's her telling her own story, which I could not tell better than her. I'd love to share that for a quick moment. So I'm going to hit play. It's about 4 minutes long, but I think it's truly worth it. Let's see.
Great Uncle Mac, he had, I think he had maybe 8 restaurants at one time. The most famous place was like a little hamburger joint, and all the teenagers every Friday and Saturday night, it was like on happy days, they'd get in their cars and they'd circle for hours and hours on end and, buy their pink cookies and hamburgers and stuff. Eventually, my uncle retired and he sold the business, and after a few years with the new owners, they ended up closing, of course, and everybody just still kept talking about my Uncle Mac. First book was really small because I could only get my hands on a few recipes, because a lot of those recipes are just gone, they're long gone. But then after the first book came out, other people that worked for my uncle started emailing me more recipes. And so hence Volume 2 came in. And I had a lot more recipes then because I got my hands on some of the old cookbooks from the restaurant, from the bakery. My great aunt Helen, she did a lot of community affairs and stuff and would hold, like tea parties and stuff like that. And so New Year's Eve, they'd make this eggnog, and that was the fun thing making in Volume 2 was the eggnog, because I went ahead and followed the recipe to a T, and I had this gigantic bowl of eggnog. So I told my husband, there's no way we can drink all this. So on the first book, because there were so many that were getting sold, when I was invited to Abilene to do a book signing, it was actually held at my great uncle's old restaurant, the hamburger joint that everybody circled around during their high school days. And it was bought by a food bank company, so people would go there for help and whatnot. So they were kind enough to open up their doors on a Saturday when they're normally closed to allow us to have the book signing there. And I had t-shirts and tote bags and stuff. The little walking chef, my grandfather was the one that designed that, and he worked for Mac as well. So with the cookbooks, the t-shirts, the tote bags, everything, I donated my profits to the food bank to help them. I think we got them over $2,200. When I decided that I wanted to do the cookbook, I went online during my free time and was looking up all the different websites, that allowed people to create their own cookbooks and whatnot. And, I'd get in there and sign up for one and kind of play with it. But a lot of them just weren't that user-friendly. And that was the one thing that I liked about CreateMyCookbook, is because it was easier to navigate, because I am not a computer person. And when you get into something and it's just too complex to maneuver around, you just tend to say, forget it. I'm not using this company. There's got to be an easier way. When I came across y'all's, and I'm like, now I can work with this. Don't be intimidated. Just jump right in there and do it, because I had never done a book before. I never knew didn't know the first thing. All I knew is that everybody was clamoring before that book was even done. I was getting word back that even places like in the farmer's market down in Abilene, my name was a buzz down there because everybody's, did you hear? Did you hear? They're making a cookbook. You know, that gives you motivation, and it's not something as big as that. Just do it. It's fun. You know, it's a good way, and especially with COVID nowadays, it's like, you know, you get bored sitting at home, there's a perfect project. Get on there, start playing with it, and have fun.
There's Terry. Make sure I got this back on perfect. And we just adore Terry, and she's just one of many stories. And every time you hear these, you do just kind of have like a goosebumps, if you will, because they are such wonderful and beautiful stories. So, you know, kind of going into what I've spoke to, we kind of sum up why it is so important, why family recipes are so important. It's because they bring us back, they remind us of those memories, and they transport us geographically, and they help us tell those stories. They help us share our heritage with not only future generations, but our friends, our families. And, you know, they connect generations from past and from the past to the present, which is a really special thing. We can also learn a lot from recipes. We can learn a lot about our family and their culture. We can learn about the geography of where our families are from. We can learn a lot about history and traditions. So here we have Isaiah, and Isaiah he created a cookbook with us. He's a senior in high school, and I also spoke with him. And he is particularly interesting because he created this book to celebrate his family. And when I spoke with him, his mother is Dominican and his father is from India. And he said when he started, he thought that both families were very, very different. But he wanted a way to celebrate both. And so he began getting recipes from his grandparents and aunts and mom and dad. And as he started creating these recipes, he realized that, you know, there was much more in common with both sides of his families when it comes to food and the cooking techniques and the use of rice and peppers and sauces. And they actually had way more in common than he realized. And so he created this beautiful book that is just a beautiful homage to his family, and he did a wonderful job. He also did a great job of including stories about his family from his dad and his grandma. So we can also learn a lot about where we are geography. So, you know, we often see recipes are full of foods that are easily accessible to where our families are from. For me, those recipes include a lot of seafood, being from the Gulf Coast, a lot of vegetables, there's a lot of farmland, and a lot of grits. But there is a fun article that the Southern Living has posted, and there's several other that you can read on. And it's like also the naming of our recipes, based off where we are. And this actually started an internal debate in the Create My Cookbook family of whether you call things a dressing or a stuffing at Thanksgiving. My family says dressing. And many other families say stuffing. So it is interesting. You can do research based on those recipe names, and I learn a lot there. So that's fun. Another thing is just history. When recipes are written and the ingredients that they include, or the naming of that. In particular, you see often recipes from between World War I and World War II often have organ meat. And that's because the US government was really pushing it. There was a shortage of red meat. There's an excellent book you can read called The Changing Eating Habits on the Home Front, Lost Lessons from World War II Research. I do strongly suggest it. It's very interesting, but it's interesting to see how these recipes change and adapt based off of history. And lastly, you know, the tradition that the recipe, or part of our culture, is the tradition and the traditions that they have for our family. And so these recipes do often come paired with a tradition, which I do love. One of the favorite things that I love when people do is they take the recipe, and in the notes often or on a story page, they tell what that tradition is to keep that alive for future generations. And we have Rose here. I spoke with Rose not long ago, and she started creating a family book. Her kids were off in college, and she realized that she wanted to keep these traditions alive. I have another short video I will show. Hers is a little bit shorter. Let's see.
We remember our memories through smells and flavors, and to have, you know, the exact recipe of the stuffing you make for the holidays, or how you make your gravy, or a cookie that brings back memories. You don't want that to get lost. It's really nice to have for future generations, and just for your family to to share that with them so that someday they can share it with you and say, look, Mom, I made your apple cake. Isn't it good? And it's very thrilling when your kids can do that for you.
Rose says stuffing, but she's also, whoops, there we go. So, but she's also based out of New Jersey, so that makes sense. So why is it important that we preserve these? I feel like I'm probably preaching to the choir here, because you guys already know why it's so important to preserve the family history. But I'll continue. Recipes do get lost and history does get forgotten, unfortunately, and traditions can disappear. So it's important that we preserve these things. And what I do love is when you can kind of combine digital preservation with a printed cookbook, because I still love a printed cookbook. I still love having it in the kitchen with me and flipping through it. I like it when the food splatters and it ends up on the page. I think it adds to it. And so, preserving both digitally, so that if there was ever, God forbid, a fire or something, or national desire, you still have those recipes. And so I do want to go through and talk about, different families that have preserved not only their recipes, but those stories. So typically, I will say most cookbooks, families that do a cookbook, they typically have only about 30 recipes. We do have some that only have a handful, but they're just that special, and they deserve to be a cookbook, and they deserve to be preserved. And then you have families who just take it a step further, and these are probably some of my favorite books. And this is an example. This is Sue Vander Waters. She did a book with us several years ago. And her family they immigrated to the United States in the early 1900s. And she tells stories through this book. She tells stories from her grandmother. She tells stories of her childhood. She tells stories from her aunts and uncles. And they have a particularly interesting story because while here in the United States, they experienced things from immigration laws to the Depression, World War II, the Korean War, and they kept those alive. And they also kept their recipes from Japan alive for all of those generations. And so what I particularly love about her book is she did a great job of telling that story, not just with a recipe, but she's inserted family photos. And one detail I love is that she's done a really good job of adding dates and names where she had them. I think that helps future generations fully understand the story. And she's included family trees, which you guys can appreciate. And then the storytelling. She has most recipes were actually included a story page. And she talked about if she knew where the recipe was created or how it was created and who created it and why they created it and when it was served and all of those really great things that just really flesh out the whole story for her family. So, there are ways, even when you have a recipe, that you can research it. Who originally wrote it? Has it changed over time? When was it written? What ingredients were used and how are they significant to you? And then the traditions for your family or, your grandparents. I have my recipe box from my great grandmother. And I think I learned a very interesting fact about her through this recipe box. And that is, one, she was terrible at writing checks because she used all of her checkbook to write down recipes. And I really like to imagine the story is that she was sitting at church and just decided, I need that recipe, and didn't have paper, so she just used checks. But I learned where she did her banking. I have dates, and so it's just a fun thing that I learned about her by opening up her recipe box. And in addition, I did find a red velvet cake recipe that had been missing for years that I do remember from my very young childhood. So that was a fun treat as well. So what recipes should you include in your family cookbook? And so the best place to start is if you have a family recipe box. And if you don't have one, you could probably ask around an aunt, cousin. Someone probably has one that they've inherited. But if they don't, that's okay. Because you can also just collaborate with your family and friends. Someone probably has grandma's pecan pie recipe. You just have to ask, and documenting it now is the best way to preserve that recipe. So strongly, encourage taking the time to ask family and friends to help with this project. And then additionally, to make sure you write down your recipes, the recipes that you've created, because history begins everywhere, and often it begins with ourselves, and we don't think of it in that context. But your kids, your grandkids, your nieces and nephews are truly going to appreciate you writing down those things that you've made for them, and they're going to appreciate it years down the road when they want to share it with their children and their grandchildren. So it's very important to document that as well. So now I would love to take some time and explore the designer. Before I jump in, does anyone have any questions? And I'll kind of show you how the software works. Okay.
It made me think. I've got recently discovered Norwegian cousins over in Norway.
Wow.
And I never knew the Norwegian part of my family because it was my mother's father who was first generation American from Norway. But that's something I had not thought about, was to reach out to my recently discovered Norwegian cousins and ask them if they know of any family recipes.
Absolutely, I'm sure they do, or even the recipes that they cook now, or just to kind of include that would be very interesting. Fantastic.
And what about the rest of the class? Any questions?
Does anybody have a recipe story that they would like to share? Okay.
I have a recipe story.
Oh, okay.
Some years ago, I managed many RootsWeb mail lists, and one time I posed the question to one of my mail lists if they had any family recipes. And I mentioned that in my family, my grandmother, my mother, and I all made pomegranate jelly. Well, this was a topic that didn't go very far with the genealogists. But sometime later, I got an email from a man in Malta, and he wanted the recipe for the pomegranate jelly. Apparently, he had Googled pomegranates and found this entry from the RootsWeb mail list.
Oh, that's so funny. Oh my goodness. So were you able to give it to him?
Yeah, I gave it to him.
Fantastic.
It's not an original family recipe. It comes from, I think it's Bell canning jars. But the only question I had, I didn't know whether he could get pectin. We can go out and buy packages of pectin. But I didn't know what would be available to him in stores in Malta.
Right. That's so interesting. Very, very neat. I'm glad you were able to share that with them.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I have about 90 dozen jars of pomegranate jelly in my garage.
Oh, wow. You're ready. You have jelly for years.
No, not 90, about 90 jars of
90. Okay. Okay. That makes more sense. Is it something you make yearly, or is it something you make in one big batch and just wait till it runs out?
Well, I used to have a pomegranate tree, and when the pomegranates were ripe, we'd bring them in and we'd crush them and crush the juice out of them. And I stored it in gallon milk containers in the bottom of my refrigerator. You could store it for 100 years.
Oh, really?
It wouldn't spoil. And then when it came time to make the jelly, I'd filter it through coffee filters until the juice was clear, because when you crush it, you get a lot of pomegranate pulp in it. And if you filter it through the coffee filters, that pulp filters out, and then the jelly you get is like crystal clear.
Oh, wow. That's so neat.
So when I moved up here, I lived in San Jose. This was 20 years ago. And then I moved to Reno. And so when I moved up here, I brought up all my jars of pomegranate juice. And eventually I had the time and I cooked it all up. And so I don't have any more fresh pomegranate juice because I can't grow a pomegranate tree here. But I do have canned pomegranate juice that I bought at Trader Joe's. So if I should run short, I still have some juice that I can make jelly out of.
That's fantastic. You have a solution. Okay, I see some other questions coming in the chat. I'll answer those. What's the most unusual recipe I've seen? That's a good one. Ooh. You know, I'm always intrigued. I think this comes from this. It wasn't something I grew up with. We often see mini recipes with Jello. And so I find it really interesting. The sweet ones make complete and total sense to me. But when I see the ones that have a ham or something in it, I'm always thinking, and I see it so many times that now I'm curious, does it taste good? Like, should I make this? So that's probably the most unusual one that I've seen. Let's think. Yeah, I think those are going to be probably the most unusual. Let's see. And then I have another question. I was just given a recipe book from my mom that was my great great aunt's, and there are so many pickling recipes. Yes, so many pickling recipes. I think that's a skill and something that's kind of dying off a little bit, but I do think, I mean, when someone does know how to pickle, it is really delicious. And that makes a lot of sense. And then Barbara asked, what is the software cost, Barbara? The software is free to use. We do charge for the printed books. We have a softcover book that starts at like $19.95. We do offer quantity discounts. We have an e-cookbook, so it really is dependent on what you're wanting in the cookbook there. And then Karen, you said, I have an old cookbook that my grandmother wrote recipes in pencil on the back, blank pages in the back. They're difficult to read. What do you recommend? So Karen, I do recommend getting those preserved quickly, because the longer you wait, the longer the lighter the pencil gets. And I understand that because, again, I have my grandma's and they do get very light. So we offer a service called We Type It, and I like to start there. And with We Type It, what happens is you can take pictures or scan the recipes, and we will type them for you. It's not perfect. You do still need to review it. They are humans typing these. So I do strongly suggest, running it through that and then going through and looking and making those edits so that you can save that. But yeah, I'll quickly now, if there's any other questions, if you have questions, feel free to ask them or pop them in the chat and I will, but I am going to show everybody a quick tour of the software itself. So I'm actually going to take us through if we were to create a book together. Once you create an account, you'll create a book here and you can name it. And we do ask a few little questions if there's if you were making a fundraiser or a family book, but for you guys, probably a personal or family book. And then we do offer themes. You could start with something blank, but we do have these really pretty themes that make it easier for you to focus on the content, the recipes, and the stories. And it's still going to be a gorgeous book. I do like to start with the country. And it'll have a cover there for you. If you wanted to add a family photo, that's absolutely doable. And we could do that as well. So what I love to tell people to do is to start from their recipe box and to really build this out, because we do have options for people to, once they build out the recipe box, it will auto-populate the book, which makes it really, really easy to do. So, adding recipes, again, we have the service We Type It, which I spoke about briefly before. And using this, you'll basically take pictures of your cards and then upload it so that we can type it. And it takes usually less than a business day, sometimes a full business day, but never more than that. And then you'll type it. And these are, if you prefer to type them, and we can do that as well. And as you type them, you'll build your recipe box. We do have categories in here now, but you can always add additional categories. You can arrange. I did send over to Sue a family cookbook kit guide. And that has a few suggestions. We see some families who will organize the recipes by family members. So it'll be grandma, Aunt Beth, and that's how they keep all the recipes. I've seen it done by cuisine, especially when you have multi-generations with multiple different cultures or heritages. The sky's the limit there on kind of categorizing that. Okay, I think we have another question. Oh, that was for the census. Okay, perfect. All right. And so then once from starting your cookbook, back to the recipe box, we can add them to our book. And this, I have quite a few recipes, so I'm actually just going to add a handful. Oops. Okay, let's try that again.
So these are recipes that you've already put in. You've already
They are.
typed in.
These are recipes that I've already typed in. And you can also have family or friends contribute to recipes to your book. And I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. So you can just hit batch action and add to book. And that's going to, I like this long recipe layout. Where it is. There it is. Oh, there it is. I select the layout, and you can change these, adapt them based off of the recipe, and it'll kind of build the book from there. So if you're working with family, which I do strongly suggest, because oftentimes they do have recipes that you don't have, you can work with contributors. And from here, there's a few ways you can do it. This is a contributor link that you could email. And it's going to email them saying, hey, Sue would love to have that recipe, and it'll be a form for them to fill out, and it'll say ingredients, directions, to make it easy. You could also send this email to them from the software, where you just put their email address in, and it will email them for you. And so that's an easy way to have. You'll get an email as well when they do contribute a recipe, so that you can see them in your recipe box. So going back into that, how to just take it to the next level and make it more special. I love it when we add photos. So there's multiple ways. I love family photos in particular are great because they really they allow us to, see our family and see part of their story. So we could select we do have layouts that have photos. We could select that. And then here's a picture tab and pick different pictures. I'm actually going to select this one of that is my sister-in-law and son. And because this is a recipe that she has greatly inspired. And we'll save that there, and it's there. So, and I also love, speaking to those stories, particularly, you can also add pages within the designer, to add a few after that. So if I wanted to add a recipe page, I have a particular story that I love, and that's my grandmother's pecan pie recipe. And that is because I was born on Thanksgiving Day. My birthday does not always land on Thanksgiving, but per my family, that is my birthday. They will always celebrate my birthday on Thanksgiving, and I always got my own pecan pie. It was mine. I didn't have to share it. My grandmother made it for me, and I always felt very special. So what I'd love to do is there's kind of two ways that you could do this. This is her pecan pie. I could put that story here in the notes, which is great. But I could also right after or before, let's do before, I can add a story page. And what I love about this, and add some photos. And let's see, I have a photo from the cake, the pie my grandmother would make, and of my grandmother. And I can insert that. And then I could also take this little story talking about my grandmother and talking about that pecan pie and how I got to enjoy it every year, and pop that there. And that way, one day when my daughter can flip through this, she can see, what about this recipe is so special, and why is it special to me? And you can also change the name there. So I could say grandmother's pie. We also offer another thing that I like, especially for our section divider pages. This is dinner. We have stock photos, which I love to use for section dividers because I can add beautiful imagery from within. So, I know I have a pasta of recipes in here. So I'll look for some pasta. And that just makes it easy to just take the cookbook to the next level. There we go. Does anyone else have any questions or anything in particular in the software that I could show them or help them or answer?
I love the idea that you can send links to relatives to have them contribute.
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
My husband's family is from another country, and a lot of his relatives live in various different countries. And it's really wonderful to know that it can be collaborative.
Honestly, I think the more collaborative it is, the more special the book becomes, because and people will start holding you accountable. They're like, "Where's that book? Is it done?" So it also gives you that internal motivation to finish. Let's see.
This is Barbara. Could I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
If you go with the digital route,
Yes,
can
ma'am.
you at a later point in time add a story that was missing?
Absolutely. Once you created an e-cookbook, you can update that e-cookbook that you've added. And in addition is once you've created your cookbook, you can print it and then continue working on it and print it again. And we'll, send it if you wanted the printed copy. I have copies of mine here. This one is for my mother-in-law, and I chose to use a binder, and that's because she's always making new recipes and she has a house full of boys, so they always love their mother's cooking. And so I love to add recipes to this.
Christina,
Creates that.
Christina, can you turn on your camera so they can see the cookbook you're talking about?
Yes, ma'am. I think I do have my camera on.
Okay, I don't see it.
Oh, how about I turn it off and I'll turn it back on?
Okay.
Let's try that.
I can see her.
Oh, okay.
All right. Oh. And here we go. Is that better?
Well, that's the whole screen now instead of just a little image.
Oh, I can put it back in just a moment. But yeah, so this is a binder that we offer, and I love it because I'm constantly adding recipes from my mother-in-law because she is constantly coming up with new recipes. So I can just add them into the section that I like. And I can.
Are those the ones in the binder? Are those like coated with plastic, to keep them from getting dirty from, recipe cooking?
That's an excellent question. So we have 3 different paper styles. We have a standard paper, which is a matte finish. And then we have a premium paper, which is a 70-pound gloss finish. And then we do offer it's called Bright in the Rain paper. And it is actually waterproof. So, and it's so strange because when you see it, it's almost not super impressive. You're like, it just looks like paper. But if you put water on it or you splat something on there, you can take a rag and just wipe it off, and it doesn't stain, and it doesn't leave any marks. So that one, especially for a cookbook that you're going to use in the kitchen every single day, that paper in particular is very useful. All right, I'm going to share my screen again, and that way if anyone has any questions about the designer, I'll be happy to go over that. There we go. Does anyone have any questions or wants to know how to do something in particular?
Yeah, I'd like to see how you add the family tree into the book.
Absolutely. So you will, with the family tree, you're going to want to export that as an image. And you could design that in really any design thing. There's Canva, which is great. Or Sue, I guess that's a question for you. Where are you guys? You guys are working on family trees. Do you have a program that you're working on that?
Most of the people in my class either use Ancestry.com, Family Search, or WikiTree. That's the more popular ones.
Mm-hmm. Are there could you export an image of your family tree from those?
I know you can export the GEDCOM, which is the raw data, but I don't think that would show an actual tree. We have got, in Family Search, you can actually download a tree in fan chart form, and I think some other forms too. That's something I
Right.
guess we can explore after you're done today on Family Search. But yeah, Family Search will allow you to do that.
Absolutely. And then basically you're going to want to, have that either as a PNG or a JPEG. And I would insert it as a full page image. And I know I have seen where you can take, let me see, I think I have one I could pull up quickly. Give me just 2 seconds. Where they spanned it over 2 pages. Let me grab that. Okay. So here we'll see that she's inserted a family tree. And they're just 2 images, but she's inserted it over 2 pages just to kind of give the full breadth of the family. Does that make sense? So she's just
Yeah, I like
added-
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Now,
So she just
how
added it
did-
as an image.
So she actually made it 2. Now, how did she line up the horizontal line that connects the tree on 2 pages?
I believe she designed this in Canva or InDesign, but I think you could use like a Canva, which is free to use as well, and design it, the pages side by side, so that the dot would kind of go across. But what I could do is I could ask her to, give us a short video on how she did it, and I could give it to Sue so she could hand that to the class.
That would be great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Great. Does anyone else have anything that they would like to see?
So I guess if you really wanted to be creative, you could create this family tree with their names and the picture, an image of the person as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Especially if you had images, and then what would be really fantastic is to break this out and have for someone who had enough recipes would be to take these people and do individual chapters and tell stories and tell their recipes. I think that would be a fabulous book.
I love that idea.
Yeah, I do too. I need somebody to do that. We have seen where people do the chapters off of the contributor, and they do tell this family history and they tell the family stories, and they are by the end of that chapter you feel like you know that person and you really want to eat whatever that dessert, like that pound cake. You're like, I really need Aunt Molly's pound cake right now. So you feel like you know Aunt Molly, which is fun.
Yvonne asked a question in the chat box. She says
I'm
she was
sorry.
late, but she wanted to know if you've addressed copyright, if grandma's favorite recipe is from Fanny Farmer.
So when you enter a recipe into the system, you are saying, you're agreeing to terms and conditions, which means that you are saying that you have the rights to those recipes to enter them. Does that make
so always give credit where credit is due. If the recipe is from Fanny Farmer, you need to state that, correct?
Yes, you would need to state it. And technically ingredients cannot be copyrighted, but the way the directions are written could that can be copyrighted. So it might be good to take, and more than likely if she has that recipe, she did it slightly different. So to take those directions and put them how she would cook it would be the safest way to do that.
Great advice.
Yes, ma'am. Let me pull that chat box up because I did not see that. Were there any other questions? Let's see the chat. There it is. Okay, great. So once you do have your book completed, again, you can always go back and make edits. You can order at any time, and you can share with family and friends. You will be, prompted to generate proofs. I won't go through the whole step, but once you generate, we offer multiple binding styles from a soft cover to hardback case bound. We have a wire O, which is lies flat, so that's I do enjoy that one, and then the binder, which is my favorite. You'll generate proofs, and you'll want to review those. So they'll give you the file to review, and it's also a nice way to go through and proofread and check those things. The one thing I will say to everyone is don't be too critical when it comes to abbreviations and different spellings, because I think that is part of your family, and how grandma wrote it and how she abbreviated it is a part of your story. So I like to leave those things alone. I think they're perfectly imperfect. Many people become, obsessed with making it all perfect. And the way your family did it is perfect. So embrace it, enjoy it. But if you choose to standardize it, that would be your opportunity to go through and proofread your book there. And then once you do order, again, you can come back anytime and make edits to your book or make a volume 2 or just continue adding to it. Fantastic. Well, Sue, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you guys. Again, I'll be happy to stay and answer any questions that anyone has, or in regards to recipes or in regards to building a cookbook. But yeah, I think that's all I have.
I do have a question. Do you mind showing us your webpage?
Yes, ma'am. So let me do this where I'm not logged in so you can see what it will look like. So you just, create my cookbook here, and you can get additional information. You can sign up for an account. The account is free. To work on your cookbook is free, of course. We type it is a small fee, but we do often run promos on that. And we have a how it works page where you can get additional information. And then one of my favorite resources that you can really dig into and find a lot of great information is the blog. And what I love about the blog, we do post recipes and people love to tell their story on the recipe, which I like. But we also offer different tips. Different tips for writing cookbook description, from how to, what to title your cookbook, what to and we have stories that are inspirational from other families who have written cookbooks that you can go through and read, and like, what did they include in their book. So I think that's a great resource that everyone should use. Any other questions?
Do you have a Facebook page?
Yes, ma'am, we do.
And
Would you like me?
Yeah,
I will share.
and
Let me share all of this in the chat for you guys. That's probably
Okay.
a great idea.
And what about Twitter? Do you also have Twitter?
Yes, ma'am, we do. I will put all of those things in the chat right now. Okay, so this is the web page. And then I'm going to put the Facebook. And if you have any questions at all, we also have a support email, and we'll be happy to answer those for you.
Kathy just posted in the chat box. Thank you so much. I compiled a family cookbook in the late 1990s and have been looking to revise and expand it. So she thinks that your service is going to be wonderful.
Very exciting. Thank you, Kathy. Does anybody like Instagram or want the Instagram? We also have that.
And for the benefit of the people who'll be watching this after the fact, since they won't be able to see the chat box in the recording, I'll just say that the website is createmycookbook.com/home. And the Facebook page is facebook.com/createmycookbook. And Instagram is instagram.com/CRE8mycookbook. And Twitter?
Oh, Twitter, that's what I'm getting. There we go. Let me just grab that as well. And 2 seconds to grab that one. I wasn't logged into Twitter. How am I going to stay up to date? Does anyone else have another family recipe story that they would like to share? These are my favorites to hear.
And, one of the things I've really been stressing, because I have an older generation of my family that is now into their 80s, and I'm lucky enough still to have about 3 or 4 of them still left. And, I've been so concentrated on getting their family stories about, growing up and, their memories of their grandparents and great grandparents. I think recipes is something that is so overlooked, and it really is a vital part of your family history. So I'm going to make a better effort to reach out to my older relatives and spend more time with them on this very topic.
I think, and that will mean so much to them. People, they take great pride in the the food. Oh, that's the Facebook one. They take such pride in the food that they have created, and I mean, food is such a love language. We use it as a love language, and it's just such a great way to connect with your family. Fantastic. Well, I know you guys have a lab. I'm going to pop that Twitter in there. It's taking me a second to log in for everyone. I can hang around for just a few moments in case any questions pop up, but I don't want to take from your lab as well.
Absolutely. And just while you're doing that, I want to thank you for allowing us to record today, Christina. It's been wonderful having you as our guest today, and we're very appreciative of the fact that you're letting us record, and that will be on our YouTube channel, our school YouTube channel. It'll take probably several weeks, but I'll give you the link through an email as soon as it's posted.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much. It's been such a joy speaking with everyone. I really did enjoy getting to meet everyone beforehand. I love what you guys are doing, and I think it's such a great hobby and mission, and it's so important that we do this. So thank you to you guys. And the Twitter is up.
Okay, and that's twitter.com/CRE8MyCookbook. So I think that should give everybody the information on how to follow up. And Christina, would you mind, how do we get a hold of you if we have follow-up questions, if any?
Yes, ma'am. I am putting in, we have a support email, which is support@createmycookbook.com. I'm going to put that in there as well. Any questions whatsoever, feel free to put those in there, and we will get back to you.
Wonderful. Okay, we'll give the class just a few more moments. And while we're waiting to see if anyone is going to put either a question in the chat box or unmute their microphone and ask you directly, I want to remind the class that we do go on for about another hour, hour and a half, working on our family trees, and everyone is welcome to stay. And if you are not going to stay, all you have to do is click on that red in button, and that'll take you out of the session today. But just remember to download that chat box if there's anything in the chat box that you want before you leave, because once you log out, you won't be able to get that chat box back, even if you log back in. So we'll just give it a few moments here. Okay, I don't see any more questions in the chat box. So Christina will say thank you very much. And it was a pleasure having you today. And I hope everybody in the class follows up with preserving their family heritage through cooking.
Absolutely. And I'll be happy to help. Thank you guys. I really enjoyed today.
Thank you.